Hi, this is Dwayne, and today I'd like to talk a little bit about piano technique, developing piano technique. After all, you need to know how to get from here to do what you want to do. How do you get from there to there? Okay, well, I started out, and I remember my first lesson very well. I went to Mrs. Graham's house in Auburn, California. I was 7 years old, I believe, 6 or 7. And she sat me down and said, we're going to play Up We Go with 3 fingers. Up we go and down we go. And I remember very well that I tried to play them like this. And she said, Dwayne, you can't play with flat fingers. And that's true, of course. If you ought to do an experiment. Lock your knees in place and then try to run. It just doesn't work, does it? You can't play with flat fingers. You have to have your fingers curved. So the first step, I guess one of the first steps anyway, is to get your fingers in a curved position like that. It's kind of like, I call it parachute position. If you jumped out of an airplane and you floated down, you'd land on the keys about like that. See how my fingers are curved like so? And that allows you to play like that. You can't play like that. It just doesn't work. And so make sure your fingers are curved. Another thing you ought to do is point your belly button right at middle C. Some people sit way off to the side, and they're doing themselves a disservice because it fouls up the orientation of your hands. Okay, so point your belly button right at middle C, and make sure you're sitting high enough so that you have a slight downward slant to the keyboard. So I've seen some kids practice when their parents don't realize that they should have a downward slant, so they practice like that. They're too small. There's a famous story about Erroll Garner, the great jazz pianist, and whenever he traveled and didn't have a piano bench that was tall enough, he would use a Chicago telephone book to sit on, and because he was a short guy. So it's important to get your body up high so that you can kind of slant, not extremely so, but just so you can slant down at the keyboard. Okay. So once you're in that position, how do you develop finger technique? Well, there's a number of things you can do. One thing I have always taught my students, one thing I was taught, and one thing I always taught my students was to get a Hanon book, a book of Hanon technique. They look like that. It's an old book. It's been around forever and ever and ever. And this is the first of 3 books. There's 20 exercises in this book. And you can see they look like that. Let me give you an example. I'll just turn to the first one here. And the first one goes like this. Okay, so, and the next one goes like this. And each one has a different pattern, okay? So when you play through those 20 exercises, you've learned 20 different patterns. And songs happen in patterns, don't they? There's pieces that have patterns in them like these. So you're training your fingers in advance for those patterns, okay? Now, if you go on to book 2, then you'll get into scales. And you'll learn to play all the scales like that, the major and minor scales. And then you'll learn arpeggios like that and so on, okay? So that's how you get from here to there, by practicing through a Hanon book like that, preferably with a teacher. If you don't have a teacher, it makes it tougher, but you can still do it. I know people that have done it without a teacher, okay? So it's still doable. And then after you get your body in position with your hands curved and your belly button pointed at middle C, and you're high enough, and you're practicing some exercises. There's another practice book called Charity, and there's others too. Anything will work, but I like Hanon particularly. And then what you actually need to do is play lots of different songs, okay? Lots of different songs. Every song creates the need for a slightly different technique. For example, in some songs there may be octaves like that, or octave third. That's called an octave third. I'm playing an octave and then a third under the top octave, like that. Okay, and then there's some songs that call for a run like that. So that's a 4-note run. So you'd practice that. So all I'm saying is play a variety of songs, both classical, popular, and so on, that develop different techniques, okay? So the next best thing, though, is or the very best thing you can do is get a good piano teacher, and I urge you to do that. But if you're an adult that doesn't have that luxury, you can still develop some pretty good technique on your own. So that's my tip for today. So thanks for being with me, and we'll see you tomorrow with another piano tip. Bye-bye for now.